This story takes place about a month ago. I was working in the forest with a company on getting some of the trees taken down for a housing development to be built. I wasn't happy about it, mind you. It paid the bills, though. Nowadays, I'm working with someone in my town. That's completely besides the point, though. Let me get back on track. Now, being a logger is a lot of hard work, and being that you're in the woods 90% of the time, you can come across some weird stuff. We found old tents, tons of trash, jackets, shoes. Hey, a few years back, someone even found some remains. No joke. They still haven't been identified, though. Pretty spooky stuff. Now, I've been in the logging business for a few years and never came across anything of note. A few tents and such, but nothing like everyone was talking about. I was ready to see something. I did eventually get that wish. It was about 6 p.m. and we were getting ready to call it a day. It's too dangerous to work at night, so we got off a little bit early in the winter months. The guys who were there, which was only 2, hung out at the truck and I went off into the woods to have a pee. Sorry, but when you're out there, nature is your toilet. We did have a porta potty, but who really wants to go in one of those? I was working on getting the flow going. I've been having some issues with that lately when I heard a branch snap behind me. It was getting dark and I was pretty much alone. I'd walked out a little further than I should have, so I was getting a little uneasy. I tried to look behind me while still focusing on peeing, which had finally begun. I heard a second crack, and then a chuckle. I knew then that it was my coworkers. "If you wanted to be embarrassed, you should have just asked." I then made a gesture of turning around and heard one of them call out, Never mind. Just hurry up, it's freezing out here." I heard them walking back to the truck, and soon they were out of earshot. I zipped up and started heading back, but then, snap. It was much farther away this time and behind me again. It was coming from the direction I was facing when I was taking a pee. "Ha. Very funny, guys. Come on, let's get out of here." Nothing. No one laughed and nothing moved. "Guys, seriously, I'll leave you here." Again, I didn't hear anything. I scoffed and turned around to leave. "All right, then. I don't want to keep your mama waiting anyway." As soon as I turned, I heard it again. Snap. I knew that would get his attention, I thought. Turning around, I said, "So are you I couldn't finish my sentence. Far off in the untouched forest was some kind of figure. It looked to be about my height, 6 feet, but its head was strangely bulbous. There seemed to be steam rolling off its body. Given it was about 25 degrees out, this thing's body heat had to be off the charts. It was only covered in skin. No hair like I would be expecting, especially in this weather. What stopped me, though, what made me quite literally stop in my track, were its eyes. They were a deep red and had a glow to them. They weren't unlike when a dog's eyes catches the light, but I'd never seen something like this. I could even hear it breathing. I'd say it was about 50 yards away, but the breaths were so labored and raspy, they were easily audible. It was almost like a growl. I finally regained my bearings and started to back up towards the truck. I wasn't sure how far I'd come, but it couldn't have been too far. At least that's what I hoped. Soon I was running, and to my absolute dismay, I could hear this thing pounding through the forest mere yards behind me the whole time. I looked back, and it was running on all fours despite it looking bipedal the first time I saw it. I began calling out to my friends, saying, "There's something out here! Start the truck!" Soon I could see them in the distance. They either hadn't heard me or didn't believe me. It was the latter, I soon found out. I hopped in the truck and urged them to hurry as there was something out there. They both just laughed and leisurely walked over to the truck. That was until my eyes grew wide, and the thing that had been chasing me appeared over the hill. It was now nearly wheezing and growling at the same time. Seeing that I wasn't messing with them, they ran to get in the truck and shut the doors just in time. The thing slammed against the side of the truck and fell back on the ground before screaming at us and running off. I wasted no time and floored it to get out of there. We were on the road soon after, and were all freaking out. They apologized for not believing me, but I wasn't worried about that. I was more worried about going back out there the next day. We told our boss about what happened, and while he didn't believe us at first, he couldn't deny the large dent in the door of the truck. Either way, whether he believed us or not, we still had to go back the next day. I didn't want to. None of us who'd seen it wanted to, but we didn't have a choice. It was either that or get fired for not showing up. The day that followed was pretty quiet. Everyone kind of kept to themselves. It was pretty easy to do so. Most of the team was gone. We were just told to clean up a bit around the area. The day was uneventful until we started packing up the equipment in the truck. The growling came again from the south of us. We all perked up and looked over in that direction. We couldn't see it at first, which is way scarier, but soon the growling got louder. We all looked around until finally one of the coworkers spotted it. He pointed it out, and the other coworker and myself jumped in the car. We urged him to get in as well, but instead, he pulled a pistol from the glove box and fired 4 shots at the thing before getting into the truck with us. From what we could tell, he hit it twice, once in the leg and once in the chest. That's when we got in and left. The following morning, since I was off, I called the wildlife preserve and let them know what we'd seen. I'm not sure how serious they took my claims. Even when I told them about my friend shooting at it, I really hoped they'd at least investigate. The following weeks were uneventful, and we never saw it again. It either ran off to another part of the forest or my friend actually killed it. Either way, I'm glad I've never had to deal with it again. I'm still not even sure what it was. This takes place about a week ago. For some context, I was totally alone, and this takes place in Tennessee. A buddy of mine told me about a fishing hole he came across a few days before, and I had decided to go check it out. He'd apparently had a good turnout, so I figured I'd try my luck. I asked him to come with me, but his daughter was sick, so he was staying at home with her. I told him I understood and headed off by myself. Following the mental directions I'd taken when he told me where to go, I eventually made it. Even though it was pretty deep in the woods, I had a good mental compass. I wasn't worried about getting lost. I don't know what made him think this was just some other fishing hole. It was easily the size of a small lake. I rolled a log over to sit on it and set up a new pole before getting started. It was a nice day out. That's not really relevant to the story, I just remember it so well. Soon after sitting down, I was casting out and lighting up a cowboy killer. I was halfway hoping to catch something, and another half of me was just looking to get away for a little while. I was beginning to enjoy the time alone. I'd say it'd been about 20 minutes past, and I'd caught about 3 fish, one that managed to jump out of the bucket because I'd forgotten to put the top back on. Not a spectacular day to say the least. I cast it out with my last piece of bait and decided if I didn't catch anything else, I'd throw the other 2 back. They weren't that big anyway. While I was on my last cast, I heard something on the other side of the lake. It was similar to the sound a dog makes when it was drinking water after being in the heat, a really loud lapping sound. I focused on the other bank, and sure enough, there was something drinking from the water on the other side. My eyesight isn't what it used to be, but I was fairly certain on what I was seeing, and I didn't like it. It was like nothing I'd ever seen. I'd say it was the size of a deer and stood like one as well, with its head being held low to reach the water. But then, it did something I'd never seen a deer do. It dove into the water. Now, I'm not super well versed in wildlife, so I thought nothing of it at first. It was a little weird, sure, but I thought it was just something I wasn't familiar with. Soon after it had disappeared under the water, I saw my cork go under. I went to grab the pole that I had wedged in an opening of the log I was sitting on, but about that time I did, my entire pole went into the lake. It happened so fast, there was no way I could have grabbed it. Totally dumbfounded, I looked out to the lake. I didn't think there was anything in there that could pull down my pole, but I started thinking about what I had just seen on the other bank. That's when I grabbed my pocket knife. It wasn't a huge one, but it could cause some damage. I started packing up, staying on my guard just in case. Then I heard it. There was a wet, sloshing sound from behind me. When I built up the guts to turn around, I nearly fell over. The thing I'd seen on the other side had come out of the lake and was now right in front of me. I could barely process what I was seeing. It was covered in scales and had large webbed feet, but it was standing on all fours. Its face looked similar to that of a duck, and its eyes were small, black, and beady. Large gills covered its neck, and from what I could see, it had small, sharp teeth all over the inside of its mouth. The way it breathed in and out, and yes it did, was disgusting. The gills would open up and close as it inhaled and exhaled. It started coming over to me and hissed as it walked. I held the knife up as a way to keep distance between us, but soon it was charging. I had no choice but to swing my knife, and by some miracle I connected with it. I hit it somewhere near the gills, and it cried out in pain before running off back into the lake. I left all my things there and decided to run back to my house. I wasn't sure if that thing was coming back or not, and I didn't want to take the chance. Once I got back home, I called my buddy and told him about what I'd seen. He told me that he's never seen anything like it and didn't believe me at first. I expected that. I didn't want to believe it myself. The following day, though, we went back to that spot, and the footprints that thing left were still there. Since then, we haven't went back. I don't know what that thing is lurking in the lakes of Tennessee, but I feel like I was never meant to see it. I'm not sure when this story takes place. It was a good while ago, maybe 5 years ago. Either way, all you need to know is that my friend and I were taking a walk through the woods near his house. We'd been out there for around 20 minutes when we came across 2 other guys. They seemed to be around our age, and we assumed they were doing about as much as what we were doing. Being the social butterflies we were, we stopped for a little small talk. The kids seemed a little nervous at first, but eventually opened up and told us about the hangout spot. It was a little vague, but we were bored and saw no harm in it. Soon we were following them deeper into the woods. We kept the conversation going the whole way. They asked if we smoked, which we did, and they claimed to have a plant out in the forest near the shack. I was really feeling good about this. I thought that we'd find a new place to hang out and some new buddies to smoke with. I was so wrong. A handful of minutes passed, and as we were coming up on a dilapidated shack, "It's not the prettiest thing," one of the kids said. He was right too. It looked like if you farted on it, it would fall over. "Just follow us inside. We've got some cool stuff in there." I was just about to walk right behind them when my friend grabbed my arm. When I turned around, he pointed over to a large rock on the other side of the shack. When I looked over, I saw a foot slide behind. Something was fishy about this. We gotta go. I didn't realize what time it was." Just as we started backing away, an older man came out from behind the rock screaming at us. We turned and booked it the way we came. I don't think he ever gave chase, but we didn't stop to find out. We made it back to my friend's house and told his parents about what happened, which prompted them to call the police. They came out soon after, and they walked with us back to the spot where we'd seen the group. Once we showed up, there wasn't anyone there. The police searched the inside of the building and around it. They didn't find much, but what they did was a bit disconcerting. A hammer, a little baggie of pills, and a ton of used syringes. I don't know what kind of messed up things that group had planned on doing out there, but I'm glad we didn't get the chance to find out. So, I'm sure everyone has heard about these staircases in the woods, right? If you haven't, then go read that long post by the search and rescue officer. Well, I thought the whole phenomenon was bullcrap, and if I remember correctly, we were never given an explanation as to why you shouldn't walk up them. Now, I don't know if that story was all fiction with a little bit of truth thrown in, but I can assure you that this one is not. This all happened nearly 5 years ago, but it was so strange it stuck with me. I have some pretty thick woods behind my house. I've been back there before, just checking them out, but never really went deep enough to find anything interesting like streams or ponds. I decided one day in early summer that I would. I owned them after all. They came when I bought the house. I'd say I walked about a mile in before I came across something really interesting. It was a cobblestone staircase in the middle of a cobblestone rectangle, about 40 feet by 20 feet. Despite the size of the foundation, it was only a foot or so high. The stairs, on the other hand, went up about 6 feet. I'm not really sure how they were still standing, honestly. They didn't have any support. I decided it would be a great idea to walk up to the top of them to get a better view of the forest. I took it slow, of course. Like I said, they didn't look stable. To my surprise, though, I made it all the way to the top without issue. It was when I turned around to see if I could see my house that the problem arose. A loose stone slipped out from under my foot and I was sent straight to the ground. Fully expecting the hard, unforgiving ground, I set my arms out to catch myself. Imagine my surprise when my hand went deep into ice-cold, powdery snow. Now, if you remember this happened in the middle of summer, there should be no snow. On top of that, it wasn't snowing in the first place. I shot up, totally freezing, being dressed in canvas sneakers, cargos, and a button-down. I looked all around and the entire forest was covered. The snow was at least 8 inches, judging by how deep my legs went in when I stood up. The strangest thing, though, was that the staircase was still there. My mind was racing. Had I knocked myself into a coma? Why did it feel so real then? Snow was still falling rapidly, so I searched all around for my phone, but to no avail. It was either too deep in the snow or just totally gone. I couldn't dig for more than a few seconds before my fingers started going numb. I decided instead just to run back to my house and try to find something that would help me wake up. I was obviously unconscious. I had to be. I trudged through the snow, my toes crying out in pain from the cold, but soon I was in my front yard. Immediately I was confused. My car wasn't there. Rather, there were 2 cars and a small pink bike out front. Still thinking this had all been a dream, I barged through the door, knocking off a Christmas wreath that had been hanging there. I was met with a decorated foyer, my foyer. I heard a television on in the other room and someone, a man with a deep voice, yell out, "Go upstairs." Soon I was approached by him with a bat in his hands ready to fight. I began backing away, trying to explain that I have no idea what's going on or why I'm here, but he yells back that I'm insane and he's about to call the cops. I try to reason with him, but he takes a swing at me and hits the wall near me, causing the drywall to drop to the floor. That's when I know it's time to leave. I run out of the front door and head back into the woods. I made it back to where I was, the staircase, and took a second to catch my breath. I ran through what had happened when I came up with the insane idea to climb the staircase again. I figured if climbing it and falling from it the first time put me there, maybe doing it again would bring me back. I climbed to the top, turned toward my house, and let myself fall. Sadly, this time I was met with the hard, unforgiving ground. Luckily, though, it wasn't covered in snow. It seemed as if though I was back where I needed to be. The sun was out, and despite a headache, I was doing fine. I made my way back to the house. This time it was my car outside, and when I went in, I wasn't approached by someone with a bat. Now, I know everyone here will be trying to figure out what just happened, but I think I know. I believe when I fell into the past. I know how that sounds, but hear me out. It took me a while after it all happened to really think about it, but the guy I ran into was the one I bought the house from. He was the original owner. His daughter had just left for college and they needed to downsize. I'd always wanted a big house so I could have a studio for my photography, so it was perfect. I remember the conversation so well. He went on to explain that something scary had happened to them around 10 years back. He wouldn't elaborate, but I'm sure some dude wearing cargo shorts in the snow claiming he doesn't know what's going on is pretty scary. There is also the fact that he continually said he recognized me from somewhere, even though we eventually agreed he'd went to school with my dad, who I was the spitting image of. I know how that explanation sounds, believe me, but it's the only one I can come up with. If anyone has a better one, I'd love to hear it, and as a quick word of warning, don't walk up the steps in the woods. So this happened to me and my brother when we were pretty young. I believe he was 8 and I would have been 10. My dad had built us a really awesome clubhouse out in the woods. It wasn't super far back, seeing as we were kids, but to us it was like a whole nother world. After the events of this story, however, he took it down and we weren't allowed to go back into the woods. It had been getting late when all this went down. It wasn't quite dark, but it would have been in the next hour or so. I told my brother that it was time to go back, so I started packing up the snacks that we had brought while he went to go take a pee. Being 10, I was growing increasingly impatient and kept bugging him to hurry up. Of course, he was being hard-headed and wouldn't. That was until I pointed out the thing in the treetops. At first he didn't believe me, told me to stop messing with him, but when he looked up and saw it too, he quickly put everything away and started backing up to me. The thing in question was huge and perched on a branch right above my brother. It had large talons on the end of scaly yellow feet. Its red eyes stared down at him, and the sharp beak it had would open and let out a horrible screech. As my brother continued to back away, this thing spread its wings out and swooped down towards us. I remember feeling a gust of wind when its wings opened. I tried to get to my brother, but this thing was fast. When it came down, it head-butted his chest, and he dropped to the ground, struggling to catch his breath. I snatched him up and started running back to the house, hoping that the thing wouldn't follow us. As far as I could tell, it wasn't, but I didn't stop running until I was in the kitchen where my mom was. The only words I could get out were, "He fell out of a tree." I guess my mind came up with a lie, knowing that they wouldn't believe the truth. He was rushed to the hospital where he was treated for minor internal bleeding, and his chest was bruised pretty badly, but he came out of it all right. Over the next week or so, my dad took down our clubhouse and told us we were no longer allowed in there. A month or so later, a fence went up around the entire backyard. I could tell he really didn't want us to go back, but I can assure you, we didn't want to either. A few days after the initial incident, we heard that thing out there screeching like it did before it attacked my brother, and that was enough to keep us out. I have a small plot of property out in the woods. I head out there every once in a while to just get away from everything. I keep my cell on and bring my laptop, of course, but they're mostly used for the internet. It's more of an escape from the real world rather than technology. I'm glad I brought them though, because I can write this somewhere where a good amount of people will see it. The past few days I've been hearing something crawling around under my cabin. I'm not sure what lives out here, but it moves fast. I can hear it scratching around and growling at some points. It kept me up the last few nights, so I called a guy out here to see if he could figure it out. I had found out where it went, but I wasn't trained in how to approach this kind of thing. I'll let you know what he says. Okay, so he just finished, and I really just have more questions. The hole he had to go through wasn't much wider than a foot or so. He crawled all around, snapping a few photos of the damage, and thought he'd seen something at one point, but told me it was probably his eyes playing tricks on him. Once he was out, we looked over the photos. I don't really know how to approach this. There were deep claw marks all through the foundation of my cabin. They were all over the ground and even the concrete pillars that held it up. I pressed on him about what could have caused it, but he continued insisting that it was a bear. Now, I've seen a bear before. There is no way one can fit underneath that house. He barely could, and he looked to be about 120 pounds soaking wet. The last picture he showed me was a little divot that had been dug into the dirt. It was about 6 inches deep and a foot wide. I tried to get him to explain what had been going on here, but he insisted it was nothing to worry about. He'd be out tomorrow to take care of it. I wanted to take his word on it. I did, but I couldn't. I was left feeling more uneasy than I had before he'd gotten there. I decided on calling the wildlife preserve instead. It was kind of late, so I was directed to their messaging service. I tried to explain everything that had happened up until this point as best I could, and just hoped they would get back to me soon. It took 2 days. During those 2 days, I got no more sleep than I had been getting either. The thing, whatever it was, seemed angry that someone had been down there. The growling and scratching went on for nearly 2 hours. It did finally die down, and I was able to fall asleep at around 2 a.m. When I woke up later that day, I saw that the wildlife preserve still hadn't called me back. I tried calling them, but was put on hold for nearly 45 minutes. Eventually, I gave up and went about my day. It would have been a great day for a walk through the woods, but with that thing out there, I was afraid to leave. Seeing that it could claw through concrete, I didn't want to find out what it could do to me. For the record, the exterminator never came back, and never returned any calls either. That night, it seemed like it was going to be all my own on this. I felt like I was going to be stuck with this thing living under my house till it died off, or I just left and never came back. When I lay down to bed, I didn't even try to sleep. I just browsed Reddit, and as I expected, the noises started up again. This time they were more tame, and it didn't seem as pissed off. I suppose it sorted out everything the exterminator had messed up. I'd hear it for a few minutes, then I'd hear it leave, then it would come back moving around below the cabin. The fourth time it came through, I heard a loud thump. It caught my attention, so I listened more intently. There was no more noise, absolutely nothing. I thought it had finally found a resting spot and plopped down for sleep. I decided I would do the same. I was given a rude awakening that morning. An absolutely vile smell filled my nostrils and rose me from bed. I stepped outside and it only got worse. I nearly puked on my steps. Luckily, I got a call from the wildlife preserve saying that they were headed out to my area. I explained the smell and they assured me that they had everything they would need. Once they were there, they dressed themselves in coveralls, gloves, and gas masks. Trust me, it was needed. One went in and the other stayed out to help them pull out whatever was under there. It took nearly 20 minutes, but they wrestled it out. I'm not sure what it was. It resembled a large dog, but there was barely any hair on it. If it was a dog, then it was terribly infected with something. Apparently what happened was it smashed its head on a beam while running back and forth, hard enough to break its own neck, they told me. It had turned a deep blue-gray just overnight, and I could hear the guys moving it, gagging in their masks. The smell was that bad. They bagged it up and went back under only to find 6 small, I suppose I'll call them cubs, laid in the hole it had dug. Sadly, they all passed as well. It seemed that they were all stillborn, according to workers. Sometime later, they explained that they had to call someone out to clean all this up, and that it would be better for me to just leave. I didn't want to argue, so I did just that. It's been a few days, I haven't heard anything back yet. I'm beginning to think I came across something I wasn't supposed to. I'm afraid to go back and check on it, though. I was really big into exploring when I was a kid. So when we moved into a new place and I noticed that there were woods in the back, I was ecstatic. I'd say I was anywhere around 10 or 11 when this took place. We'd been living there for a few weeks and I begged my parents to let me go out into the woods, but they refused. They explained that that was why the fence was built, to keep the nosy little kids out, my dad said. Well, I wasn't going to let the fence stop me. You see, the first day there I examined the fence post and found one that was pretty loose. I knew if I pulled it enough, it would pop loose and I'd slip through. I waited until my dad was at work and my mom was busy chatting on the phone. I slipped outside and through the fence into the woods. It was nearly magical. Seeing all the tall trees, being able to stand under them was so awesome. I remember being in total awe. Not wanting to waste any time lollygagging, I set out to find anything interesting. I found a trail that seemed to be walked quite a bit, maybe from the kid who lived down there before me. It was pretty tame as far as big roots and thorn bushes go, so I started running, sticking to it as much as I could. Soon, I found myself standing on the bank of a small creek. I knew that I may have gone much too far at this point, but still wanted to press on. What I saw on the other side of the creek, though, made me forget any ideas of exploring. What looked to be a gray wolf, who was severely injured, came up to the stream. I should note here that the stream was about 3 feet across, so I didn't feel like I was in any immediate danger. There was a large gash across its side, and the more it drank, the more it howled in pain. I wanted to help it, but there was no way I could have made it across. Then something began happening that I still have nightmares about today. This wolf, and I wish I was making this up, began morphing into a man. A full-grown, completely naked man. The house turned into cries of pain and fear. He looked up at me and screamed for me to get some help. I had no idea what to do, and so I just ran home. I made it in the house before my mom noticed I'd been in the woods, and I just told her I'd been running around the yard to explain being out of breath. She laughed it off, but on the inside, I was terrified. I still haven't told my parents about what had happened. As a matter of fact, this is the first time actually talking about it to anyone. Could I have seen a shapeshifter, a wendigo, a werewolf, maybe even a skinwalker? Hey friends, thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe and click that notification bell to be alerted of all future narrations. If you got a story, be sure to submit them to my subreddit, r/letsreadofficial, and give and receive feedback from the community, and maybe even hear it featured here on the channel. And grab early access to all future narrations for just $1 a month on Patreon, and maybe even pick up some Let's Read merch on Spreadshirt.com. Links in the bio. Thanks so much, friends, and I'll see you again soon.